Hi, everyone. My name is Anya Deady. I'm a student at King's, and this spring I'm working with the APMA, so the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association, and I'm working on the Books by Heart program, specifically at King's. So if you don't already know, for the rest of the summer, King's students have free and unlimited access to carefully kind of curated, wonderful books in the Books by Heart project. And it's kind of like a pilot. So they're testing it out in King's so as to later implement them in the hospitals across Nova Scotia. So it's a great, important initiative. And I really encourage all King's students to sign up, if not to get a really fantastic sort of research project off the ground, then at least to kind of kickstart your summer reading for free. So as always, you can start reading by heading to BooksbyHeartKings.ca or to our Instagram, bbh_ukings for more info. So here to talk with us today about her book, The Honey Farm. So one of the wonderful books in the collection is King's alum, Harriet Alida Lye. And by way of introduction, Harriet is the author of 2 novels, 1 memoir, and a children's book. Her work has been published in the New York Times, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, the Happy Reader, Hazlitt, Vice, Catapult, and more. She founded the literary magazine Her Royal Majesty, which ran for 6 years and republished the first ever short story by Alice Munro. She teaches creative writing at the University of Toronto, and she lives in Toronto with her partner, their 2 children, and their 2 dogs. So hi, Harriet. What a pleasure to chat with you today. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. I was absolutely gripped by The Honey Farm. I'll start off by saying I loved it. Yeah, one of my favorite reads of the year, especially of this collection.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So to start us off, can you say a word or 2 about what people can expect from The Honey Farm? What's it about? Kind of what are we getting into when we pick up this book?
So it's a novel set on a honey farm in Northern Ontario that the woman who's running the farm, Cynthia, along with her assistant Hartford, have decided to market it as an artist's residence to get extra help tending to the hives and running the farm throughout the summer. And a lot of people who arrive are pretty happy with that because, you know, they're quote unquote artists who don't really have a project in mind and they're just happy to have a summer hanging out with some cool people. Some of them are pretty upset because they really wanted time to work on their art. 2 of the people who wind up at the farm, Sylvia and Ibrahim, fall in love. And the whole novel is like I was influenced by the structure of Exodus from the Bible. So it opens with a quote from Exodus that I always imagined being in the voice of Cynthia, this kind of omnipotent, controlling force of the honey farm. And the quote is, "I will lead you to the land of milk and honey, but I will not travel among you, for you are a stubborn and rebellious people. If I did, I would surely destroy you along the way." And that's obviously like the Old Testament God, but I loved thinking of that as this kind of like, yeah, this Old Testament God, but applied to a contemporary woman running the farm. And so there's plagues that are throughout the novel, but they're not really plagues. They're all explained away by like rational things like, oh, there's iron deposits in the water, or there's just like, it's spring, frogs get born, or like, you know, sheep just get sick sometimes. And I really wanted to have the reader have it be up for interpretation what's going on, and for the reader to be able to have their own feelings about it.
Very cool. Yeah, the plagues, I feel like that was such an interesting part of the book that you kind of feel like there's something supernatural going on, but it's kind of unclear if what Sylvia is experiencing is kind of made up in her mind or if it's really happening. And I think one current that I found so interesting was that like aspect of faith that runs throughout the book. So we have Sylvia, who kind of carries this sense of Catholic guilt almost throughout the whole book. And then we also have Ibrahim, who I wrote down one way you described his faith, something in between Egyptian and Islam, which is really wonderful. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the role of faith, if not only to those 2 characters, but to the kind of book as a whole?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think that a huge part of the Western world is influenced by faith in one way or another, whether it's on an individual level or not. Like I'm not as an individual I don't follow any particular faith, but I was raised Christian, and like I feel like so much of the structure of our world in North America is governed, like we have Christmas break, like we have
Yeah.
Sundays, few things are closed, like there's just a lot of subtle and bigger ways that our lives have been informed by some sort of faith structure. And I also think that there's like nature plays a really big role in the book, and the
Mhm.
power of nature. And so there's just like this feeling that things bigger than yourself are at play in your life. And um, I wanted Sylvia in particular to have this fear of doing something wrong, and that maybe that's why these things are happening, right? Like when she gets pregnant, she's like, oh, that I'm being punished, like that's why these things are happening. And I, like, as somebody who went to King's and studied in FIP, I think that learning all of those different, like learning about religions from a secular perspective was really interesting, and that shaped my writing in the book.
Mhm. No, I was thinking exactly that. As a King student, it kind of seemed, I always find it interesting when writers allude to things that I've read or things that like post-secondary has brought me. So yeah, I'm wondering if you think there's anything about, other than kind of following the trajectory of sort of religious maybe aspects you picked up at King's or elsewhere, if there's anything book specific that you think would appeal to King students in particular.
Anything that about the book in particular?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I changed the location to be set in Halifax, where
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia is from Halifax, because my publishers are Nova Scotia based. And originally I had Sylvia coming from BC, which was kind of a weird choice for me because I don't know BC at all. And then my editor was like, you obviously don't have to do this, but in order for us to publish the book, but it would be really good if you thought that it could work for Sylvia to be from Halifax instead of from BC.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, of course. Like I know Halifax way better. I can just write about Halifax better, feeling more comfortable about, like, there's the Trident Cafe and bookstore in it, and like the train station down by the harbor, and the Northwest Arm, and um the little Dingle Tower, like little
Yeah.
things I liked writing about and felt comfortable writing about. So people who go to King's will probably enjoy just it's not much of the book. She's just from there. So it's just like the first chapter from Sylvia's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that King's students are very artistic and like in different ways. And Ibrahim, like I really loved writing Ibrahim, and
Mm-hmm.
the way that he just gets completely absorbed by his painting. Like I loved writing about that.
Very cool. Yeah. No, that one part about the tower where you say, or Sylvia's kind of recalling what her family home on the arm was like, and you say presiding over the bay like a chess piece about the tower, which any student from King's, I feel like that was such a sort of seminal experience going down to that part. So that was such a fun.
Oh,
Lovely.
good.
But yeah, okay, Sylvia is such a fascinating character to me. It seems like she's well, she's post grad, so she's kind of at this precipice of like, am I going to become something? Will I or won't I? Like, she's a writer, but not really. And she's also, one thing I think that is so interesting about this book is the naming. I feel like their names all do kind of some like thematic work. And one time you you characterize Sylvia as sylph-like, so quite feminine or graceful, but she's also hungry for something. So I'm wondering what the kind of inspiration for this character. She's kind of our protagonist, although it's not told explicitly from her perspective. But where this inspiration for a protagonist who is kind of neither here nor there. She's quite ambiguous, where that comes from.
I think that anyone can identify to that sort of becoming state of feeling like you're in the middle of becoming something, and no matter where you are in your life, there's always there's many points in our lives where there's a sort of feeling of a fork, and you can do one thing or another. And I was interested in writing about a character who feels like she wants to be something, but I think that she already is, right? Like when the chapters that are more in her head, so the way that she observes the world is very much as a writer, but she's also left the fairly structured life that she had with her family and has fallen into a different kind of like mother mentor figure in her relationship with Cynthia.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just quite she's very malleable, I suppose, and she's vulnerable and doesn't have confidence in herself to know her own authority.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's why a lot of readers at the end, not to jump start to the end, but a lot of readers at the end feel frustrated because they think that she will just sort of be like going along with whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that that's what's going to happen. And I was so surprised when so many readers thought that.
Yeah, I mean we'll get back to the ending, but I think in some ways that seemed to me the only way the book could end. Obviously I was frustrated, but it made perfect sense to me, I think. And on Sylvia, I'm wondering if you think that she's unreliable in any way, or if obviously it's not told. I mean, it is told kind of from her perspective, but if you see, or if you wrote her with the idea in mind that she would be an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, definitely. She's like, I've been working on a like film TV adaptation of it since the book was published, or
Ooh.
even before the book was published, actually. And so even though the book is kind of equally between her and Ibrahim for a lot of the book, and then also Cynthia, we're never
Mhm.
in Cynthia's head, and we're in Ibrahim's head, and we're in Sylvia's head, but she is the one that we will see the world through.
Mhm.
Especially like in the film, you just have to pick one. Um, and she that's what I wanted readers to feel. Like I wanted them to feel that they were so deeply in her head that they weren't sure whether, like as you said earlier, like is she crazy or earlier, like is she crazy or is she the only one who accurately sees what's going on? I
Mm.
think that's what I was always hoping the main tension would be for the reader. Going back and forth, like it does seem like Cynthia is up to something, but it also seems like Sylvia is very fragile and vulnerable and not secure in herself. But like, is it Cynthia who's making her feel that way, or is it her
Mhm.
childhood and her upbringing or her mental health that's making her feel that way? So I really did want readers to be very much in Sylvia's head and feeling that same level of confusion and frustration. And then yeah, I did want that for sure.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. 'Cause, yeah, there are certain points where you're going, what like where am I? There's moments near the end, certainly, where you're very much so in Sylvia's head. And Cynthia is doing things that kind of could be just quite taking like caretaking, like she could be taking up a very normal kind of caretaking role, but then you don't know if the phone calls not going out are legit, or if like it just
The midwife not coming, it's like,
yeah,
why not?
exactly, if that is just like a factor. So one thing that I loved is that I didn't know what to make of Cynthia. Like I think that at certain times she's described as amphibian sort of, so like kind of shapeshifty, but I also felt like she was a bit comforting. There's moments where she actually is quite sweet. So I'm wondering if there's a side kind of that you pick or Cynthia's characterization, or if you kind of just like to dwell in the ambiguity of it.
I think that it's possible for somebody to be both.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that that's a way that people who are trying to gain control of somebody do so, is by being
Totally.
comforting and by being nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that she genuinely is comforting and nice, and whether or not you think that she's doing it for some ulterior motive, um, is that's what is up for interpretation. And I think that she is doing it for some ulterior motive at some points.
Mm-hmm.
She wants them to stay, right? Like she really wants them to stay after the others leave.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that scene where she kind of can interpret Sylvia's dream, right? Where
Yes,
she
yeah.
night where like, yeah, she has an intuition and a power that I think is uh very, yeah, very strong over Sylvia. And also the ways in which she instructs Sylvia in the beekeeping world when they're like containing the swarm, like the power that she has over the bees and the calm sense that she has. Like, to be a good beekeeper, you have to be very firm as well, and firm but soft and confident. And but then like the scene where she's making Sylvia kill all of the dead baby bees is like creepy. But then when she's looking after the baby kittens, like, I wanted there to be like, I think that people can be both. And there's that, like, it's a farmer mentality too. It's a beekeeper mentality. It's a, like, yeah, as a parent, I wasn't a parent when I wrote this book. But I can see as a mother, there's times when you have to be very matter of fact, but also very compassionate.
Totally. Yeah. And to jump back, earlier you were talking about in faith or in the natural world, there's kind of like this overwhelming kind of aspect to it. And I think I got the sense that this, certainly because the title is The Honey Farm, but there's a sense that this could only have taken place on a honey farm because of the way that whatever kind of pseudo society that they're building kind of mirrors the way the bees make their society. So Sylvia is constantly wondering, like, who's the queen and who's the worker. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the role that the natural world plays. I know you did a bit, but if you could kind of expand on it.
Like the natural world, specifically beekeeping?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that, a lot of the metaphors and the richness of like the layers wasn't even intentional. It just sort of comes up because because the beekeeping world does have, like, the bees, and the apiary world has so much like dark, grotesque metaphor and allusion already inherently within it. And there's so many easy parallels that we can make with, like, the matriarchal world of the hive, but also you can't have two queens at once. I feel like that's a really important line. They put it on the Australian cover, like, you can't
Oh,
have two.
cool.
And so even I hadn't planned all of those things when I started writing it. I just wanted to write a book set on a honey farm.
Oh, cool.
So I wasn't like, I didn't go in and plan all of these things, and I wasn't like, okay, I want to explore these themes. What would be the right venue for that? I just wanted to write a story set on a honey farm. And so, it was just incredible how much there was to draw from. Like, I loved the learning that story that I incorporated into the book with the Samson and Delilah, where the lion was just all of a sudden filled with bees and honey, that made their nest inside of this lion that Samson had killed, and that he ate the bees, and like, what's stronger than a lion and what's sweeter than honey, or whatever that was. So there's just so many things that are there that I didn't have to make specific connections to, because they're just there.
There.
And yeah, there, with faith and with the natural world, I think what I was also trying to say is that there's a mystery, and that there's a sense that we will never know the answer to things. And no matter how, like, so there's, yeah, with religion and with the natural world, there's a sense of faith too, of like, well, like, we just hope that after a volcano, like, things fine, or like, we hope that like a child is sick and so we pray, or like, whatever it is, there's just a sense of hope but not being in control.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I think one thing about the mystery aspect of it, it's quite psychological, but there's also, like, you seem to be setting up the reader with clues or all along, but yeah, I'm wondering how you would classify it if it wasn't classified for you as a published book, like as a mystery or a psychological.
I would say it's a psychological drama. So it's not like a real page turner thriller. It's more of a psychological drama, I would say. And psychological because, as we were talking about, you're deeply in Sylvia's head, and so you're through her psyche, the reader is left to figure out, like, the ambiguity there.
Totally. Cool. Okay, I think the ending. It's time to talk about the ending. I don't know if you want to avoid spoilers or not, or maybe we can just say stop watching
Right.
if you.
Well, I would just say with the ending, um, what I imagine is that like the honey farm has this great power over Sylvia, right? But we see her before she gets to the honey farm,
Mhm.
and she's a very different person than who she is by the end. And I do think that whether it's Cynthia or just the space there and her uncertainty and her fear and her anxiety, like going through pregnancy alone, not being in contact with her family and her community, which
Mhm.
is really isolating for her. Like she's experiencing some kind of postpartum and like pregnancy psychosis, I would say, like at an extreme. But she's had the baby now, and then she's leaving the farm. And so I think like it's very clear in my mind that, this is the contemporary world and they're in Canada, and she's leaving the farm. And so she's going to get help, or she's going to find herself again very soon. And there's no way that the book will be the way that people like think that it is. Like, oh my God, Cynthia got exactly what she wanted. Like, of course she didn't. Like, Canada in the modern day, like, what do you think is going to happen? So I think that like I hoped that the reader would just go like forward in time by a week or something, or like
Right.
a couple days, and be like, oh, okay, it feels like this is what's happening, but that's because we're so deeply in Sylvia's head. If I
Mhm.
really think about this for a second, it's not the ending that I think it is.
Totally. I think, yeah, that's exactly what's so brilliant about the ending is that you think it's going to go one way, and then, yeah, you spend a week away from the book and you go, actually, she'll be all right. Because it's almost like any kind of story where the main female character kind of goes a bit whatever, has a bit of a rough go. It seems like there's no hope for her for a little while.
Hmm.
But I think by ending it on the note that it ends, you get the sense that, um, yeah, she'll be all right. I don't know how else to put it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's, I hope that people feel that way. But there is like, it's so fun to talk to you about this because I wrote the book so long ago, and it came out quite a long time ago now. Like it came out 5 years ago. So I haven't, even though like, and I'm not super involved with the adaptation. So it's nice to just like hear all of these thoughts and put my mind back in there. But I'm thinking of the scene when Hartford is painting the room pink.
Mhm.
Like Cynthia told me to, and it's really quite creepy.
Yeah, there it also like at the end of it, I don't know, just picturing her, first of all, it goes, she leaves the same way she came. And then it's like you're looking back at like this family, like kind of like American Gothic portrait of Hartford, Cynthia, and this newborn baby. And I think there are like certainly that's creepy, but I think the way I saw it is maybe that Cynthia isn't an evil character and she just has her own. I mean, she's got this whole backstory. So she's got her own stuff to work out, but eventually all parties, like it seems like it's all going to resolve itself. I don't know why.
Good. I'm glad you felt that way. That's how I felt about it too.
Okay, great. I think my last question for you is in the blurb for the book, it's described as Lily King, or yeah, Lily King, so the author of Writers and Lovers, meets Patricia Highsmith, the author of The Talented Mr. Ripley, I think. And I also felt like a touch of Otessa Moshfegh, who is amazing. And I'm wondering if you agree with all of these, or if you have other stylistic influences, or none at all.
I had never read Lily King when I wrote this book, and I had also never read Patricia Highsmith when I wrote this book. Um, and I had never read Otessa Moshfegh when I wrote this book. And Writers and Lovers came out much later than The
Mhm.
Honey. I love that novel. Um, but I think that the one that they were thinking of was Euphoria.
Okay.
It's a little bit, I still haven't read it. But the tension of like the Patricia Highsmith, and she writes a lot of queer stories as
Mhm.
well. Patricia Highsmith does, and uh, the book that I feel like I was thinking of it's not even a direct reference at all, but I had this feeling of when I was reading Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro.
Oh,
Have you
cool.
read that one?
I haven't read it, but I've been told to read it.
So it's like there's this mystery where you don't know what's happening, and it's not scary, but there's this creepiness that's building where you feel like something is not right and it's in a very isolated place. Um, so that's the only, like, I wanted to have that feeling that
Right.
for the reader where, yeah, it's not scary, it's not grotesque, it's not a thriller, but there's
Mhm.
the tone creates a sense of unease that
Mhm.
makes you kind of find out what's going on.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. But you've got your next book, Let It Destroy You, which is a historical fiction, as far as I know. Feel free to just kind of plug that and give readers or viewers a chance to hear about it.
Sure. So Let It Destroy You is a novel that I had the idea for a long time ago. And I also had the idea for my memoir, which came out a couple of years ago. And I was like, I don't know which one to write next. I had like 20 pages of each. And my agent was like, just write whichever. And then
Mhm.
the so I did the memoir first, and then I wrote this one. And I was just kind of contrary to the honey farm, which I just wanted to write a book set on a honey farm. With this one, I had this idea that I really wanted to explore the idea of guilt and
Mhm.
that it's possible to be guilty for something that you weren't really involved with or didn't intend to have happen. And as I was thinking about that, um, I was talking about it with a friend, and she's like, "Oh, like maybe like the guy who invented the bomb." And so I researched it, and the guy that everyone thinks invented the bomb is not the guy who, in many ways, it seems is the one who invented the bomb. And so I became
Right.
completely fascinated with this guy. Like she meant Oppenheimer, who
Mhm.
did invent the bomb. He was just involved in the government execution in America. Like he was involved in the Manhattan Project. But Leo Szilard is this Hungarian Jewish physicist who, the more I read about him, the more completely fascinated I became with him. And he invented the idea of nuclear energy. And he was so noble, and he just wanted to save the world. And he wanted to give this research to the people who would like help create clean, cheap energy that could stop
Right.
global warming. Like he already knew that it was causing problems for the planet to have coal burning. And even though like global warming and climate crisis wasn't on the table back in like 1920,
Mhm.
uh, and but then this was in the rise of the Hitler Party in Germany, and he knew that the German government would be exploiting this for a bomb. And so when he moved, like there's lots and lots of stuff, but he moved to America with his girlfriend. I don't think that they were married yet. They had a long distance relationship. And he gave his research to the government in the States, but was like, well, you can never use it as a bomb because that would just be devastating. And then they did, and he was like, well, it could be worse. Like if you put cobalt around the bomb, then it would kill every living thing because the dust would settle everywhere. And
Mhm.
he said that on live radio, and that is one of the things that like instigated the Cold War, because all of the governments were like
Right.
trying to develop the worst bomb in the world. And then he also got cancer later in his life, and he used that same idea for cobalt, making it be radioactive to
Mhm.
create the radiation machine, which is still the radiation machine that we use today,
Right.
a beam of cobalt isotope. And he cured himself of cancer. But I wanted to tell this kind of a story without writing a biography.
Mhm.
I changed a lot of the facts, and uh, I changed a lot of the chronology, and I changed a lot of the facts, but it's inspired by this guy who I was just so compelled by. And also, so despite his like real high-minded idealism and ambition, he seemed like an absolute monster to his wife and girlfriend. And I think that that's quite common in a lot of
Mhm.
relationships. Like just even think of The Marriage Story, the movie, and what that's based on, like the Ingmar Bergman.
Mhm.
Um, so I had to tone down his cruelty to his wife because it was just like too
Right.
much.
Right.
he would like, they lived long distance, and then she was like, I really want you to marry me. And so he's like, oh, fine, like married her. And then he's like, 3 days later, he's like, we need a divorce. This is awful.
Okay, sure.
They were long distance, and he would never come and visit her when she was on her period. He
Okay.
was just brainstorming because it made her crazy, he said.
Sounds, yeah, like a good dude.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds amazing. And it's out June 6th. Does that sound
Yeah.
right? Okay, great. So once you're done reading The Honey Farm, you can check that one out. I don't know if it'll be included in the collection, but yeah, okay, so that's all we have time for. Again, thank you so much for coming on and to chat about this wonderful book. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure that King students across the board will as well. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.